Hello and welcome to At Issue. I'm Tom Hauser. The 2024 Minnesota legislative session is officially underway, and lawmakers largely picked up where they left off last year, disagreeing on a number of issues, including legislation impacting school resource officers and several others. There is a much smaller budget state surplus this year compared to last year's nearly $18 billion, but this is not a budget year, so much of the focus will be on a state building projects bonding bill and some controversial policy issues.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You sure?
I'll take one.
Yeah,
of course. Thank you.
Governor Tim Walz welcomed lawmakers back by handing out homemade apple blondie bars.
The House will come to order.
It was a rare moment of bipartisanship as Republicans soon moved to take quick action on controversial issues.
We need to return some sanity back to St. Paul as soon as possible.
Minority Leader Lisa Demuth tried to slow down a controversial end-of-life bill regarding the terminally ill and called for quick action on a school resource officer bill. Both attempts failed.
I hope that's not going to be the story of the session. What we brought forward today were priorities that are faced by Minnesotans, specifically the school resource officer issue, and to know that went down almost on party lines except for one vote was really frustrating.
Republicans plan to highlight for voters what it means when Democrats control all of state government. DFL House Speaker Melissa Hortman says the election can wait.
While we're here, we're focused on doing good work for the people of Minnesota, and we'll worry about the election later.
One issue that will need bipartisan support to pass is a sports betting bill.
There are Democrats and Republicans who would like to pass a sports betting bill. There are Democrats and Republicans who oppose passing a sports betting bill. I think those who are in support are having good conversations together. So I'm hopeful they'll come to an agreement that we can get passed.
If it does pass, Governor Walz says he will sign it.
It seems to me like this is probably the year to talk about that in a non-budget year. They've done a lot of work in the past. I think we know where the bottlenecks are.
The proposal to make Minnesota a sanctuary state for undocumented immigrants is also on the table, but getting a lukewarm reception and seems unlikely to pass this year. House Speaker Hortman doesn't think it has enough support because there are too many unknowns about that bill. The Minnesota Senate also met in a brief floor session on opening day. Despite passing a long list of bills long sought by DFLers in the House and Senate, new Senate Majority Leader Erin Murphy says they still have more ideas.
We passed a powerful agenda last session. We did. But that doesn't mean we've run out of good ideas. That doesn't mean that Minnesotans aren't still contending with the cost of childcare, the lack of access to health care, the rent is sometimes too high, food insecurity, et cetera.
They had $17.5 billion of surplus last year. Democrats did. They spent that. They raised taxes by $10 billion. They spent that, and we're looking at a budget deficit going forward.
That was Republican Senate Minority Leader Mark Johnson. The two Senate leaders will join me in studio in our next segment just a few minutes from now. Lawmakers are also tackling an issue that sparked controversy statewide. There's been confusion over a school resource officer law which caused many districts to pull SROs from school buildings at the start of this school year. The main focus of a new bill is to define what a school resource officer is and standardize training for them statewide. The new law, which went into effect in August, restricted the use of force against a student by school staff and school resource officers. That created confusion on how officers could respond to unruly behavior on school grounds. The new bill being proposed would remove SROs from that language, and instead an entirely new policy would be created for them. That means the Minnesota Post Board would be tasked with creating a model policy by mid-2025. The first hearing on that bill took place on Monday.
We all recognize that SROs in schools can be a complicated conversation that require honest and careful consideration, and it's essential that we provide clarity through this bill to ensure the health and safety of our school communities.
And if a community so chooses to have an SRO, this bill will help ensure a higher standard in specialized training.
Now, opponents of that bill who spoke also brought concerns about the potential disproportionate impact they see on students of color. Last year, the legislature made it a crime to use deep fake videos and audio to spread misinformation about elections. It's punishable by up to 5 years in prison and/or a $10,000 fine to use deep fakes to spread misinformation and influence elections. Now, a new bill would add the additional penalty of banning candidates from public office if they use deep fakes.
It's important that you save your vote for the November election.
That robocall from the New Hampshire primary last month sure sounds like President Joe Biden, but it was a deep fake, likely made with artificial intelligence technology.
The law now states that it is a crime to disseminate a deep fake.
Senator Erin May Quaid authored the legislation outlawing deep fakes in Minnesota elections last year and is back now with an updated bill. In addition to prison and fines imposed on people found guilty of using deep fakes, including these examples involving Donald Trump and Joe Biden, a candidate who knowingly allows it to happen would forfeit their nomination for office or the office they already hold.
This year's provisions strengthen the deepfake bill, and Clean Elections Minnesota urges you to pass SF 3550.
David Fisher of Clean Elections Minnesota supports the bill, but some Republicans who supported the original bill outlawing deep fakes say it might be too soon to make changes.
I feel it veering a lot closer to First Amendment issues than what we had before. I also had the same question. We haven't even had an election to test how the law that we applied last year went.
Minnesota Secretary of State Steve Simon won't weigh in on specific penalties, but supports strict laws against deep fakes.
In the wrong hands, AI and deepfakes in particular can be a real danger in the sense that they can mislead and misdirect voters.
And in a close election, that could make the difference between who wins and who loses. The original bill passed almost unanimously in the Senate and House last year. The updated version passed out of the Senate Elections Committee Thursday on a voice vote and will be heard next in the Senate Judiciary Committee. Governor Tim Walz announced a special election to fill a vacancy left by the resignation of State Representative Kurt Daudt. It will be held on Tuesday, March 19th. If necessary, a special primary would be held on Thursday, February 29th. Daudt announced his resignation from the legislature last month. He left his seat the day before the legislative session began. He represented District 27B, which covers parts of Anoka, Isanti, Mille Lacs, and Sherburne counties. Daudt was House Speaker from 2015 to 2019 when Republicans held the House majority. Yet another round of state tax rebate checks are going out. The Department of Revenue will begin reissuing expired one-time rebates next week. There are more than 128,000 that expired after being issued in November and December without being cashed. Previously, the checks were mailed from a Montana address, and many might have been thrown away because taxpayers thought they looked like junk mail. This time, they'll be mailed from the state of Minnesota and are signed by the Commissioner of Minnesota's Department of Revenue. So keep your eye on your mailbox. Up next, we go deeper into the 2024 legislative session, speaking with leaders of the Minnesota Senate. The majority and minority leaders share their thoughts on some of the major bills up for debate this session after a break.